especially for Malik, these are perfect conditions. UAE conditions, slower pitches, spinners are going to be bowling. I think he is going to play an important role with the bat.
Well, that's pretty full, that's pretty close, and that's out. Will they be asking the third umpire to get involved?
Hello and Assalamu Alaikum. Welcome to a new episode of the Third Umpire podcast. I'm Ali and this is Ali.
We're going to be talking about the Pakistan team heading specifically in the context of the World Cup, which starts in the main Super 12 stage, starts in 2 days from when we're making this video. And just everything we're going to be talking about, the schedule, the strengths and weaknesses of the team, what the team needs to do in order to be competitive at the World Cup, what the biggest challenges are going to be. I said that Fakhar Zaman and should be in the team and there should be a specialist spinner. So they did that. They brought in Fakhar Zaman last minute after I made that video. They replaced Azam Khan. And we saw that Fakhar did really well in both the warm-up games. So I'm really happy that Fakhar has been included. I think he's an important player in this lineup because this lineup kind of gets a little too stagnant, a little too anchor heavy. And Fakhar, despite not being the most consistent, he needs some luck to go his way and stuff like that. He can be explosive, which is what this lineup desperately needs.
Agreed.
So yeah.
Just a small word on Pakistan selection. Traditionally, the preliminary team that we select is just something that's like a nightmare for all the Pakistan fans around. The job of that selection is to scare everyone. And then after that is when you have the team that makes a little bit more sense. If you notice in the last World Cup, we didn't have Amir, we didn't have some other batsmen. And they were then included at the last moment. And similar to this, I don't understand the point of selecting such a, what's the word? Mediocre team. And then just adding 3 players or adding 2 players just to fix it at the last moment. It doesn't make sense to me. Fakhar Zaman is always going to be in my T20 squad, even in my ODI squad.
Agreed.
You can't not have Fakhar Zaman. So
yeah,
a short word on Fakhar Zaman, though, since we started talking about him. I think it's a blessing that Pakistan have brought in Hayden. And I was watching a video of Hayden as well the other day. And there's so much resemblance between his stance and his batting style and Fakhar Zaman as well. Extremely strong through the offside, a still head. The way that they perform, it's so similar. And that's why I saw why Hayden has taken a liking to Fakhar, watching Hayden's most recent interview with the PCB as well. So what are your thoughts on similarities between Hayden and Fakhar, and how much do you think batsmen around the team, not just Fakhar but batsmen in general, will benefit by having Hayden around?
I think that the adjustments, one thing though is that this is a very short notice appointment. It's a short tenure, right? It's not like he has months to work with the boys. And I think it's his first major coaching gig as well. But I think Hayden, one of my favorite players of all time, one of my favorite batsmen ever to watch. I think the biggest thing that he might be able to implement is the mindset of the batsman, because obviously you can't change the technique in such a short period of time, right? So if anything, he can instill a certain plan, certain mindset that this is how you should be approaching in this sort of situation and stuff like that. As far as Fakhar is concerned, obviously Hayden is a legend, right? But if anyone is going to be compared to him for me in this Pakistan team, it's him, because he is the sort of aggressive batsman in this team. Just wanted to ask you something. What are your thoughts on what do you think the top 3 should look like? Do you think it should be Babar, Rizwan at the World Cup? I think that's what they'll go with. And at this point, I think that's been the tried and tested top 3 for us, right? Babar, and then Rizwan, and then Fakhar. So what do you think about that?
Most importantly, because we've been watching UAE pitches, I was watching a video of Amir recently, and he mentioned the same thing. In the UAE, you need a batsman to utilize those first 6 overs throughout the year. In fact, throughout our podcast, I've been always telling you how important it is to have an aggressor and a stabilizer as your opening pair, but we've never really needed that because Rizwan and Babar have clicked so well. But why? What's the main reason for that? Is because of those bouncy pitches that we've been playing in, is because of the good wickets. But in UAE, you don't really get that, right? You don't really,
100%.
you can't really maximize that, So looking into, trying to answer your question in the best possible way, I feel Fakhr, he's the best batsman in our team right now based on current form, right? Most powerful batsman. You do have Haider Ali as well, but I feel the only way we can play Fakhr Zaman as an opener is if we have Haider Ali in the team. Because what happens if Fakhr fails?
No one in the middle to hit.
Who's going to save us?
Yeah, who's going to hit in the middle? Yeah.
You have Asif Ali, who has performed in the last game, which I think he's going to play because he performed in the last game.
Yeah, he's going to play.
You have Malik, who's not a power hitter. Hafiz you're supposed to be a power hitter.
Hafiz is not in form too.
And that also, but he's coming in earlier as well, so he's not going to be there during the 15-16 over if you look at it through averaging out everything, Haider Ali, for me, if you play Fakhr as an opener, you have to have Haider Ali in the team. So for me, my top three, giving you a whole story and now answering your question, my top three for the first game against India is going to be the same, which is Babar, because I don't see them playing Haider Ali. So what I think Pakistan is going to end up playing is Babar, Rizwan and Fakhr. Primarily because we didn't see Haider Ali play in the warm-up matches. I hope that perhaps we could go with Babar and Fakhr and maybe bring Rizwan one down, and that would also allow that would also free up Hafiz, to go and play the strokes that he likes to play, that he's known for playing. That's perhaps the best way that I could incorporate all these factors into that one point. What about you? What are your thoughts?
One point I want to make is, in the UAE, we know that it's not like India. It's not like Karachi mein jo PSL ho raha tha. It's not like Pakistan either, right? The outfields aren't as fast. Like the ball, it's not like you touch the ball, it's going to go for 4. And the pitches aren't as true, right? So for me, that only makes the first 6 overs more important. Because once it comes to the last 5-6 overs, the ball is a little old. You have a bunch of fielders outside on the boundary. It's much harder to hit. But in the first 6 overs, when the ball is still new, it's coming onto the bat, there's only 2 fielders outside the circle. That only makes the initial power play more important. And I've said this before, the team that does well at the World Cup, I feel, is either the team that's going to score really well in the power play or the team that's going to defend really well in the power play when they're fielding. So I feel like since they're going to go with Babar and Rizwan, what they need to do is either Babar or Rizwan. They do this already, but they really need to emphasize the fact that one of them needs to say to the other, it doesn't matter who, that I'll anchor through this innings, you should go after it, depending on how they're feeling, how well they're feeling the ball and stuff like that, right? I think they need to decide that amongst themselves and make that plan, that one of them is going to be a little more aggressive in the first 6, because we should aim for that at least 40 runs, even if a wicket falls. You know what I'm saying?
And we've seen traditionally why we have to break away from the fact that, I've constantly said how similar Rizwan and Babar are, is that Rizwan is the second highest 6 hitter in the past annual year, despite his stature, despite the style that he's known for playing, right? So that's also an additional comment to your point right now regarding how one player can potentially become the aggressor. But going back to your previous point that you made, about capitalizing on those first 6 overs of the power play, I have to disagree a little bit with you there, primarily only because of the warm-up matches that we've seen currently. And I wasn't expecting it either. I was expecting it to be the way you described it. However, watching these warm-up matches right now, it seems to me that the teams aren't able to really push through those first 6 overs, primarily because the opposition teams play that spinner in the opening part of the game. It's more like sticking through, having the least damage to your batting assets. Now it's a little different only because of the UAE, because you're looking to save your assets for the latter part of the innings. So I do agree that you have to win your power plays. It's a crucial part. But especially if you look at the West Indian team, everyone has power hitters. If you look at our team, it will be more difficult for us. That's why you're right. It is really crucial for us to
At the end,
maximize that
yeah.
power play. But I don't think that it's going to be a priority for each team. The priority for the teams is going to be, get in, understand the pitch, understand and stay and bat as long as you can, because you have, it's more like an ODI. It has a more ODI feel to it. Playing in the UAE with the heat as well, and you have to understand that these aren't easy conditions to play in. We saw the PSL as well, how difficult it was for the players to manage the heat as well, right? The weather is a little bit better now in the UAE, but still, I mean, those day matches are going to be really difficult. So for both sides. So the way I look at it, it's more about saving your batting assets in the first 5-6 overs and then capitalizing, having wickets in hand. It has a more ODI feel to it, perhaps.
Yeah, in general, I would agree with you, but I think in the context of the Pakistan team, like you said, we don't really have that explosiveness that other teams possess. So I think that makes it a little more important for us to maybe capitalize in the power play when the fielders are in the circle. So
True.
yeah. What do you, so do you want to just go straight into the India game? The way I see it, each team is going to be playing, 5 games in the Super 12 stage, right? And our first 3 games are our most difficult games. So the way I see it is that Namibia and Scotland are good teams, but I don't see them challenging India and New Zealand. So the fact that we're gonna beat them, it's basically a 3-4 team like free for all between us, New Zealand, India, and Afghanistan. Those first 3 games that we have are the most important. And out of those 3 games, we have to win. The way I see it, we have to win 2 of them if we want to go to the semifinals. Like, I've done all the permutations and stuff like that in my head. So out of India, New Zealand, and I know our record against India in World Cups couldn't be worse, but that first game is crucial, because if we lose that first game against India, we have to beat New Zealand and Afghanistan, and that's not easy. So what are your thoughts on like the toss? First of all, against specifically against India.
So
What do you do if you win?
It's an evening game. What would I
Yeah.
do if I won the toss? Since it's the first game of the tournament,
Our first game, you mean, right?
our first game of the tournament, right? I think it's really important. See, that's a really good question, because you have to understand that the first game of the tournament could even be potentially like, it's really similar to the last game of the tournament as well, right? Because number one, it's an India-Pakistan game. Number two, having runs on the board is really important. Number three, that due factor does come into play, right? It's a day-night game. The due factor does come into play in the second innings. It will be difficult to grip the ball. It will be difficult to have those yorkers in the last few overs. Me, if I would win the toss, I would go to bat first. What about you? I don't know. It's a difficult question. What would you do? It depends on the pitch. It does depend on the pitch as well.
It does depend on the conditions. I had this long discussion yesterday with a bunch of friends on Twitter, and they were suggesting that the due factor might not actually be a huge issue. But still, I would personally bowl first. And my reason for that is 2 reasons. One, if we don't have a set target in mind, what bowling first allows us to do, our batting to do, is see a set target and go after it. If we don't have a set target in mind, I worry that our batting might just fall short a little. They might aim a little too low, And the second big reason is, in the bowling, we don't have a specialist spinner. And I feel that if we defend a target without a specialist spinner, okay, Imad does do a good job. Shadab does all right sometimes. We have Hafiz and Malik, but this is India. This is the Indian batting lineup we're talking about. And without a specialist attacking spinner in the middle overs, I think it's a little scary to put a target on the board. I feel like they might be able to chase it. And with also the fact that if they go with Hassan Ali and Haris Rauf, which they will, I like Hassan a lot, but if they go with both of them, who is your reliable bowler in that case? It's only Shaheen. So it's a little scary for me to go in there with a target on the board. I feel like they can chase down more than we think.
The only reason why I mentioned that we should bat first is because it's always good to, similar to to a final game of the tournament, it's always good to have runs on the board. Going against India, I feel like we would perhaps, because see, what's our weakness? Batting. Traditionally, what's our weakness? Batting, right? So getting that out of the way immediately, it would perhaps be better, as opposed to what's our strength? What's our supposed strength? Bowling.
Supposed strength, yeah.
In the last game, we clearly saw perhaps the opening part of the game would be our bowling strength, but towards the latter end, it's not. So getting that, because keep in mind that this game is as much pressure, if not more, for India as well. They have to maintain that amazing record that you just mentioned right now. They have so many people, so much to prove to everyone, right? They have a lot to lose. Pakistan is the underdog, right? Clearly.
Of course.
So going into this game, I mean, go with your weakness, go with your batting, and, be confident about that. If you go with your strength in the first innings, perhaps it could...
One thing I want to stress about the Pakistan-India game is what Hayden said, that a lot of it is going to be about the leadership between Babar and Kohli. And for me, that translates into a bigger point. In Pakistan-India World Cup games historically, Pakistan have almost always lost. Recently, we've also been an inferior team on paper in recent World Cups. But in general, from the start, they always do the basics better than Pakistan. India always do the basics better than us. We always drop basic catches. We always bowl like wrong lines. In batting, we make basic mistakes. So that comes down to the composure. So we don't have to do anything fancy. We just have to follow the basics right and play a clinical game of cricket. Nothing crazy. That's how I
agree with you 100% there. And just a little bit to add to the players that we discussed in the right now, I want to talk a little bit about Haris Rauf. I know we're going all over the place, India and then players, and then we're going to probably come back to India as well. But that's the beauty of this video, firstly. But secondly, I want to talk about Haris Rauf. I was watching an interview of Umar Gul the other day. Umar Gul mentioned Haris Rauf. What's his strength? You tell me, Ali. What's Haris Rauf's strength?
It's supposedly death bowling, Yorkers.
Okay, I would argue otherwise. I would say his strength is pace. That's perhaps the primary reason for him being in the team, right? Let's just speak in terms of tradition, right? So traditionally, he's known as being an extremely fast bowler, right? 150, whatever, right? Or close to that. Now, the problem that Umar Gul described was that if a player doesn't stick to his strengths and he tries to learn perhaps swing, tries to perfect that, tries to bring other things into his repertoire, which traditionally is not, he doesn't need to have that swing bowling option where you have Shaheen doing that. You have perhaps Hassan Ali doing that for you. You just need to focus on your pace, your line, your length. So Umar Gul clearly mentioned that if he only did that, you look at bowlers like Lockie Ferguson, for instance, or really fast bowlers, if he just focused on that, perhaps Pakistan would be, then perhaps our strength is bowling.
So, like I mentioned, the basics, very important in a game like this. High pressure game, less need to do something fancy, more important to focus on the basics. Now let's just talk about some key Indian players, specifically against Pakistan. Obviously, Virat Kohli is an Indian legend, right? But if you look at a few of the T20 World Cups of the past, he has done really well against Pakistan, often chasing scores on his own. So he's a key wicket. We know Rohit Sharma is dangerous. Who do you think is a key wicket for Pakistan?
As I've mentioned to you, especially in the previous video, KL Rahul is, a player of, especially the past year he's had, T20 cricket. I think he's the most prized scalp for Pakistan right now. I was watching, Akash Chopra. I was watching his video, and he as well. He mentioned how KL Rahul is the best player in India right now in T20s. So I think his wicket is going to be really important. One thing I like about Rahul, I've never really noticed this before, is how he's also somewhat, maybe you could call him a three-dimensional player. He can play all around the park. And that is something that's, if you look at Team India, they have players that play shots which you can't even expect. Like, there's so much unorthodox cricket.
It comes down, I feel, to we know these guys have done it hundreds, millions of times in the net, right? So it comes down to how mentally, like, in the zone you are, how well you take pressure, because you just have to execute something you know how to do. But it's obviously easier said than done with the amount of pressure. But that's what makes like an average player a great player, right? How well they execute when the pressure is on. One thing I want to mention quickly about India's bowling is Varun Chakravarthy. So there's very little footage of him out there, and he's a mystery spinner who had a really good IPL, and he's being talked about a lot by Indian fans and the Indian management. He has a slight niggle, but Virat Kohli said that he's our secret weapon who we're going to use in important games. Like, we're going to manage his workload in the World Cup. We're going to use him in important games. That really scares me, because I feel like he is going to play against Pakistan. And our record against newer bowlers and these like mystery bowlers with variations is quite terrible. So how they negotiate him with the bat? Do they play aggressive against him? Do they just sit on the crease and defend against him and figure him out? Do they just see away his overs? His overs really worry me, because in the past we have struggled against spinners like that and newer bowlers. To move on to New Zealand, I feel like we have a good chance against New Zealand, actually, in the UAE specifically. If we can, I feel like they'll struggle against some of our spinners. They'll struggle to manage them, and I think we can negotiate their spinners pretty well. So worst case, even if we lose to India, which, whatever, I think we still have a good chance. Like, if we lose, we shouldn't just like give up hope, because we can
net
beat
run
New Zealand
rate is going to be really important. Right?
Yeah, that's another thing. I think we can beat New Zealand and Afghanistan. Pakistan can beat them.
We could even beat India, but let's see. I mean, it all comes down to handling pressure. Absolutely. So New Zealand, you're confident about that. To be very honest with you, there's something about this Pakistani team which it's slightly different from the past Pakistani teams we've had. Perhaps it's something in Babar Azam's captaincy that just eases the pressure off the players. You can see them enjoying their game. You can see them it's just much more relaxed. So perhaps Babar gives them that freedom to express themselves and enjoy their game. So I've never really seen. Have you ever seen Babar Azam putting pressure on the bowler or enforcing?
Not really. No.
He's really calm even in the most difficult situations. So
yeah,
I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how that comes into play, because we've seen with Morgan, with Sammy, how successful they've been. I was watching Ramiz Raja's interview again, and one thing he mentioned was that this team is Babar Azam's team. He mentioned that in his past, he made YouTube videos where perhaps some of these, like 2 players out of this team, would not have been in his team. So he's clearly mentioned that this is Babar Azam's team. So going back to my question, what do you think about Babar Azam's captaincy, considering the fact that now, I mean, this is his team?
I think the fact that this is his team, it's definitely a good thing. I'm of the opinion that the captain, most of the successful cricket teams of the past, the captain has most of the power, right? Not like this whole like management. Obviously, every management has a role, selectors have a role, but I feel like in cricket, the team plays best when the captain has most of the power, because that ensures that the captain has some level of accountability. Because otherwise the captain can say, I had no say, whatever. So that ensures some level of accountability, and that ensures that the decisions that the captain makes are going through. So I'm really glad that Babar has the power that a captain should have, because a lot of the times there's been a lot of politics in the past in Pakistan cricket, where the captain doesn't, the players rebel against the captain, and then the upper management doesn't like the captain. So I think that's the way like a cricket team should be set up.
We have Wasim Jr. We saw him play in the warm-up match. He does have a lot of pace. He can bat. One thing I like about Wasim Jr., you spoke about unpredictable options. I think for us, Wasim Jr. is an unpredictable option.
Yeah.
We saw with Hassan Ali in the Champions Trophy, he was an unpredictable option at the time. So Wasim Jr. could be our asset, our hidden asset in this tournament as well. I would have loved to see Dhani in the tournament, because I feel, and that just speaks volume about Wasim Jr.'s role in the team. That just shows how impressive he's been, that he's managed to keep Dhani out of the team. Otherwise, clearly Dhani is in the team, right? Just perhaps because that batting option, even if you look at Team England, everyone, they bat so deep. Perhaps Pakistan was looking at that as a model. and that's perhaps why Wasim got the go ahead. Instead of you spoke about specialist spinners prior to this. How important, how valuable do you think Usman Qadir would have been to this team? Precisely, I mean, primarily in the game against India. How much of a role do you think he would have had to play against the Indian? Because he is another asset which the Indian team have not played against.
Yeah. India generally tend to play leg spin better than most teams. That's like how it's been historically. So I don't know about how valuable he would have been, but he would have been an attacking spinning option, which is something that I've always said should be in your T20 side. But honestly, what's done is done. He's not going to be I don't think he's going to play. And unfortunately, I don't think Haider Ali is going to play, another player who I wanted to be in the team. So at this point, we can only do the best with like what's there. And I think Shadab and Imad, and I think Hafiz needs to be utilized well by the captain. This is where Babar's captaincy is going to be tested, how he rotates these three spinners. And then Malik is a fourth spinning option as well. So I think Babar needs to utilize these guys, when to bowl who. Should I bowl this guy when a wicket falls? When should I bowl one of them to break a partnership? Because it is a risky option as well, bowling Hafiz and Malik. So we have 4 spin options, technically 5 if you include Fakhr. And it's not like we have a shortage of options. It's just we don't have an attacking spinner, but I think it's fine. I think if these 4 spinners are utilized to the best of their capability, we can still, it can be a good substitute for a specialist spinner.
If it would have been a day game, it would have made it more easier for spinners to play a bigger role, primarily because of the heat, the difficulty to bat in those conditions, where, batsmen like to get stuck in, like to bat through those middle overs and then maximize that towards the end.
Afghanistan, yeah.
Afghanistan is a team similar to South Africa in the sense that they know how we play. Van der Dussen we've spoken about, but Afghanistan, Rashid Khan's played the PSL, Zazai has played the PSL. You have Shahzad, we all know about him. You have Rahmanullah Gurbaz. You have Najibullah Zadran, Karachi, Nabi, right?
Yeah.
We know all these players and they know how to play us. All of our games are evening games, which is interesting.
Games. Yeah.
So I just feel like if they come in with those 4 or 5 spinners, you literally have to pick Malik and Hafiz both in your team. You have
Malik
to have
specifically. His role in the team at this point is to play spinners. Yeah, so use him for that. Send him. Maybe if there's no spinner operating, don't send him. When a spinner comes in, send him up the order. His role, Malik and Hafiz, I'm glad you brought that up. They're the 2 most experienced T20 international batsmen in the world. So if at this point, they need to step up in this ICC tournament, because there's no conditions excuse either. These are, especially for Malik, these are perfect conditions. UAE conditions, slower pitches, spinners are going to be bowling. I think he is going to play an important role with the bat.
You don't see Wasim Jr. coming into the team next game?
If one change they're going to make is, because Haris had 2 poor warm-up games, they're going to replace Haris with Wasim Jr., but that's the only change. I don't see them making any other change for the India game.
Yeah, and also because Wasim does offer that batting option, but it's difficult to say because Haris Rauf has been in the team for every game in the past, right?
Yeah.
The past year, you look at it, he's been one of the top wicket takers as well. So I think just because of that slight experience over Wasim Jr., I think he is going to get, especially because of the Indian game, right? Handling pressure best. Let's see. Haris Rauf, you mentioned he had a poor warm-up game. I feel in the first warm-up game it wasn't poor. It's just those last 5 balls that he
he went for 6s or 4s.
Just 5 fours, I think. And then he got Pollard's wicket in the last delivery. But what I mean to say is those
just 5 fours.
The three overs prior to that were exceptional. And I feel that Haris Rauf did work on his ability. He did work on his strengths, which was pure pace. We saw him get Chris Gayle out, right? Before we end this video, I just want to ask you about your semi-final
predictions. So Pakistan, India from our group, England from the other group, and the second team from that group looks difficult because I see weaknesses in Australia. I think their balance is a little off. I see West Indies, they don't seem as, based on the warm-ups, they don't seem as dialed in as they could be. And then there's I actually think South Africa has a good chance in this World Cup. They have a good batting lineup with De Kock, they have Van der Dussen, Markram, and then in bowling you have Rabada, you have Shamsi. I think their team is actually pretty good, and they're coming from wins. Like they just beat West Indies as well. So I think South Africa can be the second semi-final team from that group. So I'm gonna go with Pakistan, India, England, South Africa. What about you?
For me, I mean, it's I think Pakistan, India. I heard some people say that they're not going to pick India, but I think
No, India through the last 10 years has been the hardest team to beat in group stages. In group stages, like they've last 15 years they've always gone through. They've only lost in the semi-finals, finals, and choked then. So the groups they're hard to beat.
Yeah. So Pakistan, India, everyone is saying England, right?
But what are you saying? That's like, what are you saying?
See, what I say and what I want are two different things.
No, what are you
Because I
predicting?
feel
What are you predicting? Like logically,
West Indies, England, England, Pakistan,
India. Okay, so
Yeah.
we're the same except
But
West Indies, South Africa.
But I sort of feel that you're right with South Africa.
Mhm.
I think if they play as a team, as we've spoken about before, I think they can be a strong force.
Yeah.
So I just want to wish the Pakistan team the best of luck, and I think this tournament is going to be really fun. Ali, do you have any words?
I'm just
for our
looking.
team,
I'm looking out for
our
an exciting
fans?
tournament, and I just want us to play like good cricket, basically. Yeah.
For sure, guys. So stay tuned. We're going to be posting regular videos for the Pakistan games, especially.
Yeah.
And I hope you guys all enjoy this amazing tournament. And stay tuned. Follow our Instagram, follow our Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. See you guys and wish you all the best. Assalamu alaikum. Thanks.